It's time for us to drive the enemy back.
Tell me something, to all Western AAA devs, will you keep your damn politics out of this? Out of any games? Right now, if you don't know, Intergalactic the Heretic Prophet is now about faith and religious. It is now mocking Christianity. For me, even though I don't agree with any of them, but I know disrespecting a religion is frowned upon. You don't do that. Here, let me show you what I mean. Okay, we're gonna react to Endymon's video. I'm not gonna play all of it. At least I'm gonna play for 7 minutes until the 24th mark or something, but we'll see.
This then exhaustingly brings me to Intergalactic the Heretic Prophet, which is quickly showing that Neil Druckmann, despite the response to The Last of Us 2, has decided to double down on his political views going forward. So during a Sony-sponsored interview, Neil Druckmann sat down with Alex Garland, that's the director of 28 Days Later, you know, the zombie movie series. They got a new one coming out. Anyways, these two are speaking about all kinds of things. Near the later half of the interview, Alex Garland and Neil Druckmann get into Neil's next project, Intergalactic. I could explain it to you, but I'll let Neil speak for himself. Hopefully Sony doesn't copyright this being in here, but please watch it.
Project at Naughty Dog for 4 years now. We just announced it. It's called Intergalactic the Heretic Prophet. It's our venture into more sci-fi stuff.
What kind of sci-fi? Like, I mean, obviously I know you, but is it like, you talking deep space? Are you talking about, is it Earthbound?
It's not Earthbound. It's it takes place 2,000 years in an alternate future that deviates in the late 80s.
Wow.
And we spent like years just coming up with that timeline. And it's dealing with, it's funny, it's like, I joke about this with the team. It's like, oh, we made a game with The Last of Us 2. We made certain creative decisions. That got us a lot of hate. A lot of people love it, but a lot of people hate that game.
Who gives a shit?
Exactly. But so the joke is like, you know what, let's do something that people won't care as much about. Let's make a game about faith and religion. So there is just, we not only in this alternate history timeline, we've made this, where the timeline deviates, this new religion becomes pretty prominent. And then we spend years just building out this religion of like from the original prophet all the way how it gets like changed and sometimes bastardized and evolves over all these years. And then like all these people from this
how many, you said 2,000 years?
2,000.
Coincidentally 2,000 years.
Coincidentally 2,000. And this whole religion takes place on this one planet, and then at one point all communication stops from this planet.
Nice.
And you're playing a bounty hunter that's chasing her bounty, and she crash lands on this planet. And it's and I really wanted to make a game about faith and religion, but also about
it sounds
just being
awesome.
Lonely. So many of the previous games we've done, there's always like an ally with you, and you're talking. I was like, I really want you to be lost in a place that you're really confused about what happened here. Who are the people here? What was their history? And in order to get off this planet, like, again, no one has been heard from this planet for 600 years. So if you ever have hoped to have a chance to get off, you have to figure out what happened here.
As you hopefully see, if it's still in the video as Neil described, Intergalactic will be about a bounty hunter landing on a planet called Semperia to find her bounty, and it hasn't been contacted in 600 years, yet notice when Alex and Neil are talking that Neil says his story takes place in an alternate history, where this religion veers in a different direction and specifically states that this religion began roughly 2,000 years prior to when Intergalactic takes place. And look at how Alex Garland reacted to this information when he says this.
How many, you said 2,000 years?
2,000.
Coincidentally 2,000 years.
Coincidentally 2,000.
2,000 exactly. Yeah, Alex knows. Neil is talking about Christianity. So Neil is taking something that he doesn't agree with and was taught was evil growing up, which is Christianity, and he's basically going to be using it as a bludgeoning tool, to use it to make his sci-fi adventure game, which means when the main character of this game, whose name is Jordan Munn, arrives on Semperia, she will absolutely run into plenty of religious brutality, all being done in some weird, distorted version of Christianity through the eyes of a creator who loathes it. And I think in the current media climate we're in with, Trump winning, wokeness dying, all of that, the last thing that Sony needs is a game that will objectively be making the religion of the very people who are sick of these things now seen as the enemy in a mega big budget AAA game that will be forced down players' throats at events and more. It's going to be insufferable is what it's going to be. And the fact that despite the failure of Last of Us 2 from a sales and fan perspective, that Neil has clearly learned nothing and has now instead decided to double down in the face of opposition instead. Even that Park Place mentions in their article that Neil Druckmann chose the 1980s as the point in which his news story diverges from. Coincidentally, by the way, the 1980s was when there was a notable mainstream rise in conservative Christian faith within media and the world abroad, and that he uses the word bastardized specifically in his description of this religion that he won't name that he's covering in Intergalactic should tell you everything that you need to know.
All the way how it gets like change and sometimes bastardized and evolves over all these years.
Neil Druckmann is about to beat the player over the head with his anti-Christian hammer, and you will buy the game and be glad you played it too. I've also been told in the past by sources that Neil Druckmann's studio is just hellbent on pushing anti-Christian pro-woke beliefs in their games going forward. And they are, according to my sources, willing to just bet the livelihood of the studio itself in pushing these ideas out into the world. Neil Druckmann, unfortunately, has become so brazen he's willing to spend the hundreds of millions of dollars that Sony lends him to essentially turn his games into genuine propaganda. And if people think someone like Neil isn't going to not do that, they are frankly stupid. The Last of Us Part 2 was the first game from the ground up that Neil genuinely spearheaded himself from the beginning. The first game wasn't even directed by him. Bruce Straley did that, in case you didn't know. Sure, Neil also did Uncharted 4. But again, the bones of that game's story and its world were already designed by both Bruce Straley and Amy Hennig before they left the studio. Which means the only game that Neil Druckmann has made where he, and he alone, was in the driver's seat was The Last of Us Part 2. And it's interesting that once he was left to his own devices without the people who could rein him in the past are no longer there, and then he ends up making one of the most politically charged video games of the past decade that angers fans, alienates them, spits on their loyalty, and also has the audacity to say that they're wrong and cry victim about it like he did in that Sony interview recently. And the more he reveals about Intergalactic, the more it seems like the plot of that game truly will be what was leaked a few months ago. To paraphrase it quickly, if the leak is true, Intergalactic will be about these aliens who are actually just basically space Palestinians. Instead of being non-Christian scarred weirdos who shoot arrows from trees and whatever and try to force children to be brides like in The Last of Us Part 2. And like I said, every creator to some degree will indeed inject their personal beliefs, life experiences, and then some into their work. That is inevitable. But it's obvious that Neil Druckmann is hell-bent on pushing some weird what he stands for, reject everything else ideology no matter the cost.
Honestly, the only thing we can do now is convince Sony Japan to stop. Look, I don't know if Sony Japan is going to see this, but by some miracle, Sony Japan is watching my video. See what's happening, Sony Japan. You need to cut ties with them. Get rid of them. As long as they're still doing what they're doing, they're going to lose you money, Sony Japan. All your brand will go bankrupt. I just hope Sony Japan can listen to this. I think for this, Neil Druckmann's not going to stop. The only way we stop him is that Sony Japan takes back their rights and then let all them go. Cancel everything. There's one creator that is called Devin Gibson, a Christian creator. Yep, he has a variety of it. Wokies and many other stuff. Trans people, Michael Knowles. And if he knows this, or perhaps if he heard that Neil Druckmann is about to disrespect Christianity, Devin Gibson will lose his mind. Yeah, I may not agree with him since I'm a Muslim, but I know more, I know better, that you cannot disrespect a religion. And don't say it's a game, okay? That will not be an excuse to warrant this behavior. Doing this has serious consequences. I guess the only hope we have is that Sony Japan takes over. Hopefully they cancel it. In this case, rewrite whole stuff. If it's already been like 50% of the way, then it is too little too late. Except cancel it and throw it in the trash.
Your might on the battlefield proved most impressive. With a little more training, you will be right up there with me in no time. If you are interested, would you like to learn a new skill? I am sure you could pick it up in no time, and it will surely prove useful in battle.
Leave a like and subscribe. If any of you need gaming content, comparison, or even anti-DEI, or just gaming footage and raw gaming, you can visit my first 3 channel up here or link in the description.